We're going to talk about how to center community voices in your events, especially as we dive deeper into the election season. My name is Emily Lytle. I produce the Innovation in Focus series at RJI. If you're not familiar with it, it is a monthly series where we partner with newsrooms across the country to help them try new things. So that can be new tools and technology. It can be community engagement events, which leads us to here. I recently had the privilege of partnering with a group of 4 newsrooms in Pennsylvania to help them rethink and reimagine how to do a candidate forum. And that really got me thinking and talking to other newsrooms about how they're doing events and creating safe and engaging spaces with their community, especially in an election season. So that's why I brought some awesome panelists here today to talk to you and also just hear from the attendees and hear your questions and your insights. Because I think there's a lot we have to learn from each other from different kinds of newsrooms and different experiences with community events. So this panel will be half moderated questions with the panelists, and then we'll leave hopefully like 25 to 30 minutes at the end to answer your questions. So if you have questions, the chat is now working, so feel free to put them in the chat. You can also raise your hand at any point, and I can give you permission to speak. So let's get started. Our panelists today are Mariah Castañeda. She is the audience director and co-founder at LA Public Press. Mariah has split her career between journalism and voter education, and she is one of the driving forces behind LA Taco's maturation into a news publication. She's also a reporter and the voice of the Webby-nominated podcast, The Sellout, which details the rise and the fall of a federally indicted former LA City Council member, which is quite the saga that I'm sure Mariah will touch on a little bit today. Thanks, Mariah. Elizabeth Estrada is also here. She is the democracy editor at Spotlight PA, where she helps connect voters across the state with the information and resources they need to confidently participate in the democracy. Spotlight PA is a statewide nonprofit news organization. Before that, she's worked as the engagement editor at Plan Philly for WHYY, which is the NPR affiliate in Philadelphia, where she is based. Thanks, Elizabeth. All right, and last but not least, we have Kara Edgerson. Kara and I work closely at the University of Missouri's Journalism School. She is the digital director for the Missouri News Network, where she works with the J School's professional news organizations, such as the Columbia Missourian, KOMU, KBIA, Vox, and more. Kara oversees and seeks to further unite the digital efforts of the Mizzou media outlets and has recently been working more on their community engagement strategy. She came to RJI and Mizzou after managing digital optimization teams at Gannett for nearly 4 years. All right, now that we got that all the way, let's dive in. I'd love to start by setting some kind of baseline for our conversation. So a question to briefly answer for each panelist. I want to know, what has been your experience with planning community events, whether that's in person or virtual, and how have you thought about really centering community voices rather than politicians, candidates, experts, the like? So just kind of setting a baseline. Mariah, do you mind just kicking us off?
Of course. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think, well, recently at LA Public Press, we did this amazing candidate forum with the Bull Heights beat. And what was really cool is that we worked with the community of District 14 from the beginning to the end, all the way through. The way we coordinated that was, yeah, we talked about Heights Beat. We're like, okay, we want to make sure we center the folks of District 14. I live in District 14. It's a city council district in LA who's gotten some national attention. There was a controversy surrounding our current city council member and the previous one. But we wanted to see what our communities wanted to hear from their candidates. We wanted to give them an opportunity to really ask their candidates and hold them accountable. So the Bull Heights Beat asked us to help them survey. So we surveyed with them. They surveyed the neighborhood of Bull Heights. We surveyed El Sereno. We surveyed Little Tokyo. We surveyed Highland Park. and I believe we did some more. We went to night markets. We went to a community outreach on how people were getting food or housing insecure people were getting food. We went to art walks. And we were really trying to ask the community, like, what do you want to ask your city council member? What do you want to ask people that are running for city council? So they helped us. We did outreach and that also helped us like promote our event too. Um, yeah, and then we also had a community safety team comprised of mostly people from District 14. I asked for help from my community. I was like, hey, you know what? We have a candidate who everywhere he goes, there is always like, things happen. There's a lot of things. We want to make sure that it's a safe event. We want to limit police presence because I want to make sure that the students feel safe at LAUSD. We have a history of just not great things going on with LAPD being on our campuses. So we brought in community members, adults that really want to make sure that our student journalists that we were partnering with at Bull Heights Beat could provide a safe space and could also ask their questions. We asked our audience to help us also, help the students by supporting them during this forum. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll dive a little deeper into the community safety team and some of those other strategies a little bit later. So that's a great starting point. Elizabeth, I know we've talked a little bit about how working for a statewide news organization has its own challenges when you're planning community events that are really like in touch with the community members. So can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been and maybe also some of the plans that you have going into the election season?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, because Spotlight is a statewide newsroom, I can specifically talk about our election and political focused events, but we have events all across the state, really that vary and focus on different beats that we cover. So we have a bureau based out of State College that covers Penn State that does a lot of really local events there. And so we have kind of things, all across, or at least like attempting to be really present in many of Pennsylvania's 67 counties. But as far as it comes to elections, typically our format has been, virtual. We started back in 2019 and then the pandemic hit. And so that's really where the base of our audience knows how to find us. And more recently, we've been trying to experiment more with in-person events, which has been really exciting. When it comes to kind of really incorporating community voices in our like election focused events, our approach so far has been trying to have an understanding of like what people are wondering about, what it is that they want to know when it comes to elections, whether that's stuff about processes or specific candidates. And then we have had like our journalists do like a pretty informal breakdown of like, these are the candidates, these are the races, these are the policies, ask us your questions, what do you want to know? But since I started in August of last year, what I've been working on is trying to build more partnerships on the ground. A lot of my work is trying to grow and diversify Spotlight PA's audience. Right now, our audience, I think like a lot of, because we started as part of the Philadelphia Inquirer, which is like an old institution in the city. And, like many old legacy newsrooms, their audiences tend to kind of veer a little bit older, a little bit wider. And so we're really trying to get into those younger, more diverse audiences. Pennsylvania is a very diverse state, and we have a really large growing Latino and Spanish speaking population. So as part of my work, I'm really doing a lot of outreach across the state, particularly in counties that have a really high Latino population, and really working with the leaders there to know like what's going on in your communities, like when it comes to elections, what does it look like there? What questions do people have? How can we kind of be of service to you and the work that you're already doing? And so I'm really excited because we have some things that are coming up that are really rooted in a clear need in those communities based off the conversations that I've had. And, that varies from like misinformation to just like overall trying to create like town halls where people can talk about the issues that matter to their communities. So it's a really exciting time because I think that we're trying to experiment and really expand from our typical traditional format that has been in person, that has been online and has really focused on kind of the journalists, and trying to veer more toward centering the community and their specific needs.
That's really cool to hear about like your goals and how you want to keep growing in that direction. So thank you. Kara, I know you've talked a lot about how you kind of have this unique position where you're really trying to bring these ideas into newsroom staffed by students and introducing them to those ideas. So can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been over the past like several months trying to incorporate more of the community listening sessions?
Yes, of course. Of course, our role is different. I'm really trying to build up and show young journalists the importance of building their relationships with the community. And of course, coming from the Mizzou J School, we have like professors and teams who teach them how to write well, but we have evolved. We want them to like be out there in the community and actually doing that outreach. So for me, I've connected with some of those award-winning professors who are teaching like classes to help those reporting classes and saying like, it's not just about them doing the reporting. We have to do the community outreach work. So connecting with them, we hosted a few events this year so far, one specifically focused on election to bring the community out there, telling them it's listening such. It's a lot different because you have to tell them why it's important for them to show up on a Saturday to do this work outside of their shift, and also telling them what to expect there, that it's a listening set. You know, you're not bringing your notepad, you're not doing this. So a lot of my work this year has really been showing the young journalists the importance of connecting with the communities and all of our communities. Even our events this year, like I purposely intended to do them in different communities to make sure we touch not just communities we're always talking to, but new people. So really trying to create that path for our younger journalists and seeing like, what does that look like?
Awesome. Thank you. And Kara, I know one thing that you and I have talked about before too is really thinking through the format and the setup of these kinds of events, and how they can affect power dynamics. Like, do the community members really feel like we've come to hear their voices, or they feel like, oh, we've identified these experts that you should listen to and that you should know, and we're here to educate you. So can you talk a little bit about what those conversations have looked like and how you've really thought about like making sure that these like small listening sessions are doing that they're thinking about those power dynamics and communicating that inclusiveness that we're trying to communicate?
Of course. As we like sat down and kind of really thought through topics and issues that are really impacting our community right now, like we really sit back to think like, how can we connect them? What's the right format to do that in? And a lot of times a recent event, we really wanted to do the forum setup. We really wanted some experts to come in. We really wanted a few people to come in from a certain field, but we realized that maybe that's not the best way to hear from our community. So we really stepped back to like brainstorm, like with Emily and I, we literally brainstormed about like 4 or 5 ideals in different ways to hold this forum, to where at the end of the day, we realized that what our ultimate goal was. And that was a big conversation that I had with Emily, like to where we sat down and said, what is our goal for this event? What are we trying to accomplish? And it was really listening to our community. So it's like, let's take back the forum. We want to come back to it because that's a good model. But for now, let's just listen to them and have them show up. So I think that's a good way as you're looking at your events to always think about what that ultimate goal and your purpose for that event is, to know like what the setup should be for it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I was attending a community engagement elections webinar with American Press Institute yesterday, and they were talking about this too, of how important it is to have very specific goals. Like, what do you actually want to get out of this? Do you want to grow your source database? Do you want to use what you learn to build relationships? Like, what exactly are you trying to do? And I know, Elizabeth, you've talked about this because you have like all these different kinds of events, from like the one that you mentioned earlier where you're informing voters about processes or about specific offices, to the more like workshop type ones that you're planning with the Pittsburgh groups on Spanish misinformation. And so, yeah, can you talk a little bit about when you're planning these events, what are some examples of goals that you have in mind, and how do those goals inform the events that you're organizing?
Yeah, I love this question because I think at least from our perspective as like a nonprofit, nonpartisan newsroom, we really see our events as an extension of like our public service journalism. And so the events really are there to serve the voters, to serve the people who are able to attend those events and kind of be supplemental to a lot of the guides that we publish online. So if people aren't in the mood to kind of go through the guides and read through each candidate, or like go through the voting FAQ, or like really have an in-depth sense of like what their voting rights are in Pennsylvania, you know, they can attend like a quick 40-minute event or view it afterwards, the recording, and get an understanding as to like, okay, so these are the candidates, these are the races, this is where they stand on this, or like, it's important for me to know that on election day, you know, I don't have to show my ID unless like I'm voting in this place for the first time. So for us, those kind of really standard election events that we tend to do each and every single cycle are really critical because they are based on questions that come up time and time again. And so the goal there is really to answer the need that we see each and every single election cycle, and also to create space for people to ask their specific questions that they're not necessarily going to easily be able to find just by Googling. So if somebody's really interested in like the financing, if they want to nerd out and know about the financing of like a specific candidate, like our reporters have already done that work. And also it's hard sometimes to go on a candidate's website and, you know, kind of be able to read through like all their copy that is not always very clear and is sometimes like a little bit grandiose and trying to, you know, fluff up their, you know, the work that they've done and what they hope to do. Like our reporters can really break it down easily. And so for those kinds of events, I think the goals are pretty clear. We want to be able to share information with people in a very clear way, and we want to create a space for people to ask their questions and for us to be able to answer them. For the work that I'm doing with different partners in Pittsburgh, we're also working with Capital B News, which is a Black-led newsroom, which covers Black communities across the US. They're doing this really great thing called like a Black Power political tour across different kind of swing states in the US, like for this year. And we're working with them on a stop in Philly. We're also, you know, we're one of their partners. They're also partnering with like other kind of Black legacy newsrooms in Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia in particular. And like the goal really comes from them and like the needs of their community, just the same way that when I'm working with like the Pittsburgh Latino-led organizations, it's really coming from a place of what their community needs. And like, we want to be able to serve those communities. And so, you know, and also it's a partnership, right? So like those goals aren't determined by us at Spotlight PA, like it's a collaborative process, and we really want to, you know, formulate the event based on what people want. And so I think that's kind of the goal in and of itself, like to kind of fill a void and be able to present people with something that they're looking for that they haven't necessarily been able to find. And so I think it just really varies, and it's exciting because when you're working with other partners, like those goals can be a little bit different. Of course, like we're also looking to, you know, ideally in a perfect world, bring readers to Spotlight PA, you know, have people become donors and all of that. But at the end of the day, like the way that I see it in my work, it's really about serving voters and potential voters and meeting them where they're at and being able to give them the information that they're seeking.
Awesome. I love what you how you talked about collaboration. That's something the four of us have talked about, is how important partners are, whether they're other news organizations or community organizations, and creating space for questions and identifying needs. And I know, Mariah, that was a big part of your candidate forum that you were organizing with Boyle Heights Beat, was really identifying like, what are those questions that voters have? What needs do they have, and using that to inform the candidate forum. Can you talk a little bit about what that outreach looked like? What were those practical steps that you took to kind of identify those needs or those questions?
Yeah, so we went ahead, we worked on a survey with the Boyle Heights Beat. It's really great. The Boyle Heights Beat, they took the lead on the building the survey. They asked their parents, they asked people in their communities, like, okay, and they boiled it down to like, I forgot how many questions it was. I think it was like 2 questions with like a couple, like, forgot how many answers they could have given. But what I thought was great was, I talked to folks that I knew, and I worked with Amanda, our community engagement producer, phenomenal. Amanda does phenomenal work at Lytle Public Press. And I went ahead and I reached out to folks that I knew at the El Sereno Night Market, which is this event that happens every Wednesday. I talked to someone I knew in Highland Park who has like this art walk, that's for vendors that are from the community, and people come out and do that. I talked to mutual aid group in Little Tokyo that reaches out to housing insecure people and housed people to see if we can go set up shop at one of their events or a couple of their events. So I used all these like, I don't know if I would want to call, I guess they're partnerships, right? But they're kind of like friendships that I have, relationships that I have, and, in different parts of a really large community I'm a part of. So District 14 in Los Angeles, all of our city council districts are about 250,000 people. Like each city council member represents that many people, which is ridiculous. So our districts are large, they're diverse, people have different needs. So we really wanted to make sure we had a diversity in income, a diversity in people, different cultures, ethnicities, races. I think it was really important. We want to capture all that, people of all different kinds of ages. So yeah, of course we found out that like one of the biggest issues was housing, of course. People were worried about police violence, all kinds of things. So we used those to help the students craft questions for the candidates. And then we also used our surveying as a way of letting people know about this event. We're like, hey, this event's going to happen at this time, at this place, be there. If you can't be there, we're going to have it live streamed. So yeah, I think, I hope that answered the question. Oh yeah, I could talk about community safety, but maybe you want to hear about that later. But that was also like a partnership with folks that I knew in the neighborhood.
Yeah, that would be great. I wanted to mention one thing to kind of branch off of what you said around both reaching like a wide variety of people through your surveying and asking questions, but also through advertising the event and letting people know about it, like making sure that you were touching base with people that were unhoused, making sure that you were touching base with different people in a variety of communities. And I know it's something that we've all talked about is like, how do we make sure that the people attending these events and participating are really reflective of the communities that we're serving? And I just wanted to share a link. I talked to Simon Galperin from the Jersey Bee yesterday, and they did something cool that I thought was interesting, where they wanted to make sure that their candidate form was reflective of their community. They had 40 spots available. And so what they did was they waited to release the invites until they had RSVPs from people who self-identified in that RSVP as people of color. And so they made sure that they like reached a certain number that was based on what their community looked like and what the demographics that they had were. And so he has screenshots and other things in there as well, but I wanted to throw that out as another resource as we think about how to do that. But yeah, Mariah, collaboration is huge. And I know, like, as you were talking to people, you also were realizing that safety was a big thing at this event in particular. So can you talk a little briefly about how you went about building this community safety team and how you approached that?
Yeah, so we're talking to our collaborators at the Bull Heights Beat, and they were saying that, that there was going to be police at this event, because every time was one candidate, Kevin De Leon, shows up anywhere, there's protests, there's chaos. Sometimes, it's been documented that sometimes there's instances where he can get physical with people, or his staff have in the past, or people like, so it's kind of so it's a lot. But me being from LA, me going to an LUSD school, I remember, and I know that having police presence on campus, it can make you feel unsafe. They don't have a great, it just can make some students feel unsafe. So we were thinking, okay, how can we limit police presence? How can we create a buffer as much as possible? So I went ahead and I went around and I asked one of my friends who was a community member. She's a steward at the El Sereno Community Garden. She runs the El Sereno Green Grocer. And I saw that she had put on an event, and I saw that she had a community safety team there. And I was like, what is this? And I asked her, how do you do this? I have this event. I'm worried. How do I do this? And she was like, hey, I'll put you in touch with this person. They do community safety trainings. So then Shabina, the person that she connected me to, is teaching me about community safety. And Shabina actually put together this amazing team of like, I think 11 or 12 people total. And we learned, de-escalation tactics. We learned how to, watch out and how to make sure, our participants felt supported. We're really intentional with the way we went about things too. So we had like these bright neon pink vests. We had walkie-talkies. We wanted to make sure we don't look like cops. We want to make sure that we look like, friendly and stuff. It was so cool. All these adults, they were really excited and really happy to support the student journalists and making sure that they could have their forum, making sure that they could help create a space that, where they wouldn't be interrupted too much. And they could really help facilitate that. And I think the other thing about we got buy-in from the community. We had community agreements at the beginning. We were like, hey, let's support the students. They put together these questions with everyone's input. Let's support them in holding our elected officials or people who want to be an elected official accountable. And the community was so receptive to that. So for me, I got to see, I think because the student reporters are from the community, I think because we had community input from the beginning to the end, and our community safety team was mostly comprised of people from District 14. I just thought it was really beautiful to have adults supporting kids, students. So we had elders at our event. We had, like students that were like younger. We had like rocker teenagers, everybody in between had moms. We had church ladies, everybody. I love seeing a diversity in age. I think that's so important. Um, I think the other thing I didn't mention earlier is that when we did our outreach, we tried to make sure we brought functional things to each thing we went to. So if we went to the community, the night market, we had cute little pens that had little cartoon things on it. We want to put the fun and functional, right? When we were out serving at unhoused people that are housing insecure unhoused, we made sure we brought the COVID test. We brought the wet wipes so people could take them and take what they needed. I think we even surveyed at a punk show. I think that was slightly outside the district though, but we brought, resources there too. So I think as we are asking the community for input, we do try to give like at least a little something if we can. Yeah, so I think I hope they answer the question.
Yeah, definitely. I love that idea of like how we can think about not being extractive and make sure that we're being authentic in our connections is thinking about like what is a way that you can give something back, even if it's as small as a fun pen. And that kind of, yeah, it makes that connection. That's awesome. We are at our 30-minute mark, so I'm gonna open it up to questions just in case anybody has anything that they're really wanting to ask at this moment. You can pop it in the chat. You can raise your hand. Nikki, if you want to share anything about what the Jersey Bee did, I won't force you, but you're welcome to. I'll give y'all.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
happy to talk a little bit about it since it's kind of we're fresh off of our
yeah.
candidates forum. This was a challenging forum for us because there's a lot of drama around it in Bloomfield. The former mayor sort of pushed one candidate into the position to run, and the other one is his replacement mayor, who sort of is like bucking the system and going against the machine. So while we are just trying to promote the forum, just giving the people an opportunity to ask their questions, there was a lot of opposition on social media, basically in accusations that we were biased and that we were going to give the questions to one of the candidates in advance. So we were working against something very interesting, I think. I don't know why that was the case, but I think that one side is just really, really trying to push their agenda. But it was difficult to find space, and that's why we were limited to 40 people, because also a lot of the community spaces were shut off to us. And again, I believe there was a little bit of pushback by the former mayor, who is now an assembly person. So it was really, really interesting. We're just trying to do something for the people, and it was kind of tough, but we finally got a space donated. And in addition to asking the demographic questions about race, we wanted to include, people who were underserved in general. So people of color, seniors, people with physical limitations, LGBTQ plus community. Um, and because of that, there was a lot of pushback from the community saying that we were picking and choosing who could come. But during the registration, we also asked for people to share their questions or topics at that time as well. But I liked some of the examples that other folks talked about where you met people in person and asked them. And I think that's something that we would definitely incorporate. This kind of came together last minute just because we could not find a space. So there's a lot of things that we would do better. And like a lot of digital news organizations, we're trying to figure out, how do you reach those people who are not online, who don't do email, who don't know about us? Because as hard as we tried, it still felt like most of the people responding or reaching out are sort of the same people that always do. So we have to get creative for that next time, and really go to those spaces.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I wonder, Elizabeth, can you talk a little bit about partnerships? Because Nikki, I think that's where we also, like Kara and I have also talked about how to do that, how to bring in people that aren't just like your number one fans. How you can do that by trying to partner with community organizations, but as we've all talked about, that's really hard a lot of times. For Mariah, like she's a part of her community, so she like talks to her neighbors, and that's how often I think you've connected with people. But I know, Elizabeth, you've talked about how you have that challenge of being that statewide organization too, and trying to build those authentic relationships with community orgs. What does that look like in practice?
I mean, in practice, it's difficult. Pennsylvania is a big state. There's 67 counties. I'm one person. We're a small newsroom, and even when we were able to kind of take a look at the state and be like, okay, well, because of the census, we know that like the largest Latino populations reside in like these kind of specific counties. It's still hard. The reality is that, people who are working for and leading like in their communities, these organizations, like they have stuff to do. And so I was just very much cold calling. If I had colleagues who had connections in any of these areas, I would ask them to connect us. But sometimes, no response. And so it's like I would follow up and follow up and follow up. And, the reason why we've been able to really build collaboration and partnership in Pittsburgh, even though that's a part of the state that has a smaller Latino population compared to other areas like Reading and Easton and Lancaster, is because those were people who were like, oh yes, like our community is small here, but like we want to be able to serve them, and they want to know about like civic engagement and like politics and how to be a more informed like voter. Like, yes, we want that. And so they were very gung-ho. And so, building partnerships, I think it takes time. We are a pretty young newsroom, which is a challenge in of itself. I think if you're part of like a legacy journalism organization, that also comes with its own challenges, because historically maybe people from those communities have been harmed, or they weren't necessarily included or had representation on staff. There's all these different kind of barriers that we have to overcome. And I think the important thing is to just keep trying. And, I think in Philly, like for me, it's pretty easy. I have so many different connections here. I've worked on like community led like Spanish language shows and radio, like I have those connections, and it's pretty easy here. And there's a very active community here. But in other parts of the state where it's, it's not as densely populated, because it's not that kind of city layout, people are a little bit more dispersed. How can you kind of make those connections? So I think, my takeaways are it's not easy. It doesn't get done in a day, but also persistence is really important. I think if you're really looking to build those meaningful relationships, it takes time. And sometimes, you know, you have to kind of catch the right person at the right time, because I've emailed people and they haven't gotten back to me. And then I follow up and they're just like, oh yes, like would love to talk. And then when talking, just making space for them, because, you know, I want to be able to like amplify our work and do partnerships, but really in those conversations, what I want isn't what's important. It's about listening and, you know, getting a sense of what the needs are in that community, what the work that they're already doing, ways that we can kind of supplement that and continue to serve the people, because we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're just trying to meet people where they're at in whatever way that looks like.
Yeah, that patience piece is really tough, because that does take a long time sometimes to build those relationships. But I like what you said about like having like part of it is knowing that. And in like Nikki's case, like they had to get things moving pretty quickly. So I really liked what you said, Nikki, about like, all right, we did it and we learned stuff and now we're going to like apply that to the next thing, because that was what really helped us when we did the when I did the collaboration with the 4 Pennsylvania newsrooms, was like, we're just going to be very upfront that this is an experiment. We're trying something new. We don't know, like it might not be perfect. We know it probably won't. But there's things that we can learn from it, and we want to know what the community thinks about how we did this, how we went about it. So Nikki, I also really liked like your transparency on how you kind of explained your process, especially knowing now the pushback that you had. So cool. Mariah, you have something to add on that?
I do. I do want to add, yes, I think for the District 14 piece, you know, lucky I live in District 14, but I need to, you know, I want to say that LA is a really big county. We have 10 million people here. Sometimes I do not know everybody everywhere. But I think one thing that's been helpful when I'm trying to connect with folks that are like in a different region as me is, yes, I do talk to my people I've worked with in the past, friends. I really wanted to talk to get connected to some folks in Hacienda Heights, right? And that is very far from me. That is a 40-minute drive. For us, it's kind of far. But I think one thing that's helpful is I'll talk to folks and organizations I've reached out to in the past that maybe have worked in similar circles. And I'm like, hey, can you connect me to this person? Can you connect me to that person? And I think having the connection of like, okay, I worked in this space before. I know people in this space. Can you connect me here? Can you connect me there? It helps me when maybe folks aren't responding to my emails or they're not getting back to me on Instagram. The other thing that I like to do is I like to just kind of show up at events and I'm like, hey, what's up? I'm Mariah with LA Public Press and I'm here. So that way when they see my name in the, you know, in their inbox, like they remember. And I try to make space for that, but I understand it's a little probably harder when you're more geographically dispersed. But those are some tips that have helped me in the past when I just want to get connected. I just kind of show up to their events sometimes.
Yeah, and there is an example you gave when we were talking earlier about encouraging, especially like young reporters or the student reporters, to like go to an event for fun, right? Like, can you talk about what that idea was and how that works in that building of trust?
Actually, yes. So it wasn't just student reporters. It was
Okay.
actually the LA Public Press team. When we
Oh,
first
okay.
started, our first reporting assignment was, I want you all to go to a community event, something in your community, something that you would want to go to, and I want you to talk to one person, and I want you to have fun. So we can see ourselves as being a part of the ecosystem of our communities instead of like, you know, like an observer, right? And it was really helpful because with LA Public Press, we were a small newsroom, but you know, I think like the 11 of us, we were all over LA County, we're all over LA. So it's really cool to see like people coming in from their different, you know, talking to different community members, talking to different folks. And I thought it was really nice.
Well, I know, Kara, we were talking about how that could be something that could help students, the college students at Mizzou understand what that looks like. Can you talk a little bit about like how you're working on that building of trust And I know also another thing that you've been thinking about is how to expand your strategy. You're starting in Columbia, but you'd love to see this connect into more rural and small town communities outside of Columbia, Missouri.
Yes. We decided, of course, to start small, not only because we are like, we're a community newsroom for our newsrooms, but they are student led and all students don't have transportation. So we figured that we can help and show them the way by building the relationship within Columbia. And like we said, like you talked about before, like we have had issues to where they don't trust our organization. They don't trust because of some conflict connected to the university too. It's hard for them to see like, well, you're with the University of Missouri, like why should I talk to you? So I've been working closely along with the chair of our department who does well with building relationships within communities to like show our students the way of how to build relationships and how to do it through community events. And our goal is, especially for our NPR station that's connected to us, they also are big on community events and listening sessions, and they actually cover a larger area of mid-Missouri along with our TV station. So this upcoming semester, our goal is to see like how can we get out more and connect with them, and then not only connect with them but show that we're also always here to hear their story, and not just, that's the hardest thing to do with students, not just showing that we're coming in for this one event and then you won't hear from us for 4 more months. So I'm really trying to work behind the scenes to how that consistent relationship and trust building looks like. So as we expand what we do with our outreach and listening sessions, that we know the community knows that we're actually here with them and a part of them.
Yeah, I think that the collaboration with multiple newsrooms is a really strong point. When we did the candidate forum in Pennsylvania, this was for the primaries back in March, we had 4 different newsrooms together, and we had multiple people come up to us and be like, we just like really appreciate that this is a newsroom collaboration, because it didn't feel like they had to pick that one, or I don't know, it didn't feel like it was one newsroom leading it. And so it had this feeling of collaboration. And I think that really affects how people perceive and trust what you're presenting as well. So
Yeah.
cool. Yeah,
Can I
go
just
ahead.
add to that quickly? Yeah, and I think that's such an important thing to recognize and acknowledge, because particularly when it comes to politics and elections, there's so much mistrust in, you know, news and journalism organizations. And I think we have a responsibility to try to overcome that. And I think like through community work, like meaningful community work, not just parachuting in and just doing the thing and like not coming back, but like building those relationships and those connections. I think that's a way that we can kind of overcome some of the, you know, skepticism or distrust that people have. And like, you know, maybe that will linger for some folks like indefinitely. And for some folks, like that's understandable considering the way that some organizations have like covered their neighborhoods or their communities and so on. But I think that's just like an overall challenge that can exist that we haven't necessarily named when it comes to like doing that community work. It's out there. And I think particularly when it comes to elections and politics, it feels way more heightened because the stakes are very clear, and you know, and so many voters have been just like polarized right into like 2 different parties. So I just wanted to name that because I think that's something that when it comes to our work at Spotlight PA, like, yeah, we are nonpartisan, but sometimes we do some reporting, or things will be said in an event that people are like, oh, you're clearly biased because A, B, and C, you said this. And, you know, that's just something that we have to, you know, navigate day in, day out.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people who can relate with that. All right, I am not seeing any other questions, so I'm going to keep going. But if anybody has a question, raise your hand. Nikki, if you have a question, let me know. Your hand is still raised, but you're welcome to unmute at any point. Yeah, just shout if you have any other questions. But one thing I wanted to ask all 3 of you is, what are you excited about? I know the election season is daunting, and a lot of us are not excited about it. But when it comes to community events or community engagement in general, is there anything that either you're working on specifically or anything in general that you're excited about when it comes to your work and your community?
I can quickly go first. I'm really excited to be doing more in-person events. That's something that since I've started back in August, it's kind of happened in different parts of Pennsylvania, but I haven't necessarily been able to participate. We've done some listening in sessions in Reading, which is like about an hour plus away from me, that I've been able to go and attend. So I'm really excited to just meet people on the ground, like in their communities, and also the workshops that I'm working on in Pittsburgh, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of do in another county or two, are going to be in Spanish or bilingual. And I'm really excited to do that as well. I think that that's going to be like a new thing for Spotlight. Obviously, we publish primarily in English. We do publish a lot of our content, our election content in Spanish, but that's not an audience that we have a strong connection to, that I'm working hard to build. And so I think it'll be really exciting to experiment with doing something like full on in Spanish and seeing, you know, what that ends up looking like and working.
A quick aside, Mariah, I know that y'all did a little bit of Spanish and English in the candidate forum, didn't you?
I was curious about that too.
We did. We actually made sure it was bilingual. We had monolingual speakers, whether English or Spanish. We made sure that they had like a translation device, so that way they could, you know, so we have some language justice, so people can know what was happening, and it was participate. It was really beautiful. We also passed out our bilingual attendance rights. What's it called? Zine that we made. If y'all could check it out, I think they're kind of cool. The illustrations are beautiful, very frog and toad coded. And they're all about how to get your landlord to do their job and make repairs. That's a big problem in LA. And I'm sure all across the country too.
Yeah, I'll second that. We'll make sure, if Mariah, do you have a link to that? We can get that for people later if you do have access to that somehow.
Yeah, I'll look for it.
It can be later. All right, cool. Either Mariah or Kara, is there something that you're excited about or you're looking forward to? It can be elections related, it could be non-elections related too.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to two things so far. They're kind of smaller, but we're gonna partner with some community organizations and really cool folks, and we're gonna have an event at the community garden. There's gonna be a DJ. We're gonna be highlighting, basically the whole thing is that the whole event is about supporting a food pantry and letting the folks in the community know that it's there. And they want us to come so we can bring our amazing tenants' rights zines. So we're gonna support and see what's up, how we can be, you know, make to be of service. In order to reserve the community garden, though, you have to make sure that how do you say? We have to make sure that we work the garden for 10 hours. So I was actually there for a couple of hours working the garden to make sure we can have the space for it. It was really cool. A group of us got together and did that. So I'm looking forward to that. We want to make it all ages. So we know what's successful when we have elders there, when the babies show up, when, you know, parents, kids, teens, that's success for us. And then the other thing that we're going to do is going to be at an art walk in Southeast LA. Forget which city exactly. I need to go ahead and check the calendar. But we already did something like this at another art walk in Huntington Park, which is a beautiful city in Los Angeles and LA County. And we pass out our bilingual zines, but we also have a zine making workshop that our incredible, amazing engagement producer Amanda actually puts on. So we show participants how to make zines. We like show them how to fold the paper, how to cut it so they can make like their own little like zine. And then we also have like stencils. We got the colored pencils. We got everything. We have stickers, everything so they can make zines so they can. And then we suggest that they make a zine showing us how like spotlighting something, how to do something, or like what's the best spot to do this, or who's the best at this, and then they make a zine about it. I can probably send, I think we have an Instagram post and we have all the kids like, you know, showing the zines that they made. But yeah, while we pass out zines, we also try to show people how to make their zines. So
Wow,
look
that
forward to
is so exciting. As someone who gardens a lot in her free time, I'm super excited about the community garden one, but also the make your own zine. That's super cool. I also wanted to pop in the chat something that we did at RJI. We partnered with one of the professional newsrooms here to do a quick pop-up. And I just wanted to show that like those fun things that Mariah is talking about, like they don't have to be heavy lifts. Like they can be like, go to the craft store, get a bunch of postcards, we're gonna decorate them together. And it may sound silly, but those like fun, joyful moments are, I think, really where you can like be part of the community. Like the panelists have all been talking about, like not be that observer. You get to like step into the community and be like, we're just giving something back to you, and want to be a part of what you're doing, and want you to know who we are. So if you have questions, you'll ask us. Awesome. Kara, what are you excited about coming up?
Oh, well, for this summer, we have one community event that we're planning. I'm still hashing that out to see what it looks like. We're very excited about that one. And then also for the fall, we do have a capstone course that is dedicated to our student reporters, like focusing on the election, and also just trying to show Missouri residents that even though they see us as just a flyover state, like their vote doesn't really matter. We're trying to see what we can do to pull them out, to let them know what's going on, as Missouri stories are not really being told for the election on issues. So just really trying to connect with those reporters, student reporters, showing them what I'm seeing online that people are talking about with issues in Missouri, and seeing how they're able to tell those stories and how we're able to connect with people at a community event before the election. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you all so much. We have just a few minutes left, so I'll take that time to kind of wrap up. But if any of the attendees have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the chat or raise your hand now. But yeah, thank you all so much for attending, for the panelists, for sharing your insights, your experiences, your stories. I do have a resource doc that I pulled together, just some playbooks, some case studies, different examples from different newsrooms. I'm probably going to add to it. I welcome you to add to it as well. It is editable. I put that in the chat now. We'll probably add some of the examples that we talked about today as well. And I will send an email to all of the people who registered with that resource doc, with the recording of this video, so you can share it with other people in your newsroom, other colleagues, anyone else who's interested. And I will also show you one other way to keep in touch with me. Innovation in Focus has a monthly newsletter. I put that newsletter link in the chat as well, so you can keep up with what we're doing. We're always looking for partners. So if you want to partner with Innovation in Focus on a short-term experiment project, reach out to me anytime. Panelists, feel free to, if any, I'm sure all of them would be open to talking to you about community engagement. So you're welcome to reach out to them. Yeah, feel free to put your, I'll send out contact information in that final email as well, so you can put in the chat, but I'll make sure to send that out to everyone. I think that's all I have. Anything else from the panelists? Anything else from anybody else in the Zoom room? All right.
No,
Awesome.
just go for it. Experiment.
Yeah, I think that's the takeaway. Just try something new, and have some fun too, right? Awesome. Well, thank you all so much again for joining us all here today. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. And hopefully I'll see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.